And if you let me ask one final question, which pertains to the other punching bag of, say, college educated students of at least my demographic, which is religion. And it sort of, I think, is linked also to your work as the foremost bioethicist of our time. We're not talking about theodicy or the other aspects of religion. I think your work in bioethics is at least appeal much more to me. And I think that as we are moving towards the 21st, in the 21st century, and we discuss, say, the controversy over euthanasia in Canada, wherein there's been a lot of furore over, say, medically assisted dying procedures, or say, your work on abortion rights, even as abortion rights is facing, say, a pushback in the United States, is linked to this notion of, say, sanctity of life and religion. And these are issues which you have spent quite a bit of time, say, responding to and negating, even though they have landed you in quite a bit of controversy. So as we move towards the end of the program, I'd really love to sort of listen to your reflections on, say, not just taking controversial positions, but also the fact that of how notions of, say, religion and sanctity of life really impinge on the domain of bioethics and how it may be holding us back in the 21st century.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to close on that topic. So when I began working in bioethics, I've now been doing that for quite a long time, a little bit more than 50 years. The religious influence in bioethical decisions, and especially in life and death decision making, was much stronger than it is today, at least in most Western countries. Sort of the medical students who were trained were really not given any independent ethics or bioethics as part of their training. And instead they sort of absorbed ideas from doctors, which the doctors sort of had done for a long time. So traditional ideas just got handed down. And I think the development of bioethics, which really goes back to the 1960s, I suppose, has, while certainly including some religious perspectives, has brought in a lot of other perspectives, and many people have been able to see that those other perspectives have a sounder basis than some of the religious beliefs, and that some of the religious beliefs actually are sort of, basically at odds with some of the things that the people say. So, for instance, if you think about the Roman Catholic Church, it claims that every human life is equally sacrosanct, and therefore that would seem to imply that we must do just as much to preserve any human life as any other. Now, as I said, in one sense, Sidgwick agrees with that, but he said, provided the capacities for happiness are similar for something that is worthwhile. If you have a baby born with one of the conditions that I've written about is a condition called anencephaly, which essentially comes from a Greek word meaning no brain. Now, it's not quite true that an anencephalic infant has no brain, but it has no cortex. What it does have is a brain stem. So this is not brain dead, and it is a human life. There's no doubt that this is a human being, but it's a human being who will never be conscious, will never smile at the child's mother, for example. They won't recognize the mother, and there is really no future for that human being. Now, typically what happens, there's not so many of these babies born now because it can be diagnosed in uterus, and then women will almost always elect to terminate the pregnancy. But when it is born, what are you going to do? Do you really want to say this is a human being, so we must preserve the life of this child as long as we possibly can? Well, interestingly, even the Roman Catholic Church doesn't say that. And in Roman Catholic hospitals, I've been to ones and I've taken my students to them, and the Roman Catholic chaplain has said, well, we don't have to use extraordinary means to keep the baby alive. So we can withdraw the respirator, let's say, if the baby needs a respirator to breathe, and the child will die. So essentially, they're saying you're not killing the child if you knowingly turn off the respirator that is keeping the child alive. But obviously you're not giving equal value to that life that you would give to the life of a child who temporarily needed a respirator, but had the potential for a future like yours or mine. So I think there is a lot of these contradictions in religious teaching, when they try to adjust it to make it more humane seeming to the world, or to make it not produce absurd results when we have medical technologies that can keep people alive, but where it's clearly pretty pointless to keep a child alive. And I think that understanding has spread. Now, you mentioned the question of medical assistance in dying, or euthanasia. It's interesting how that has spread over the period of again, that I've been working in bioethics, because when I started writing about this issue in the 1970s, there was no country in which that was legal. And now there are many countries in which either euthanasia or medical assistance in dying, and for those who don't know the distinction, with euthanasia, the doctor may give you a lethal injection on your request. I'm talking about voluntary euthanasia, and you will fall asleep and die. And with medical assistance in dying, a doctor may write you a prescription for a drug, which, if you take the drug, you will fall asleep and die. So the results usually are just the same, but you have to take the drug in the case of medical assistance in dying. And that has passed in more countries than voluntary euthanasia, because people seem to think maybe that's some kind of safeguard against doctors killing people. But anyway, if you look at what's happened, it started in the Netherlands. They legalized voluntary euthanasia, then in Belgium and Luxembourg. And then several states in the United States legalized medical aid in dying: Oregon, Washington, California. There's now, I think, 12 or 14 of them, New Jersey, Massachusetts, many others, that have legalized medical assistance in dying. The whole of Canada has it legal. Actually, virtually all of Australia, all the states of Australia have it legal. I think it's just the Northern Territory, which has a population of maybe 200,000 or something, is the only part, I think, that doesn't. And a number of European countries, including traditionally Catholic countries like Spain and Portugal, have also legalized it. Colombia has legalized it. So it's really interesting that it spread, and I think it spread because people realize that they want it. We all have to die, but we don't have to suffer a lot before we die. And especially if we're terminally ill and we know we will be suffering and we will not recover to a better state. Many people say, well, I want to die when I choose, not when the disease chooses. So it's an interesting example where I think, despite religious opposition that has happened, especially Roman Catholic opposition, at least in Western countries, despite that, I think it's spread, and I think it will continue to spread.